Hello, I'm Richard Fieldhouse and I'm the Chairman of the National Association of Sessional GPs, and welcome to the Art of GP Locuming podcast. And this episode today is brought to you with Victoria or Tori Ferguson, who is a tax advisor for specialist medical accountants Honey Barrett. Tori, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me on.
Oh, pleasure. And you've come on today to talk about sort of basically tax related issues with anything and everything to do with working as a GP locum, working as a salary GP, and possibly anything in between. So I suppose the thing to start off with is, as a tax advisor working for a specialist medical firm of accountants, what would you say would be your just job description? What do you do? When any locums or salary GPs are listening to this, what should they be thinking? Why is this relevant to me? What would you say to that?
That's a very good question. My job is very difficult to define, and is very, very varied, as I imagine. If I asked you, what's your typical day like, you would say, I don't have a typical day. But no, it's very much everything to do with accounts, tax, and to a large extent, the NHS pension for medical professionals. So we're very heavily involved in things like compliance, preparing locum GPs' income expenditure accounts at the end of the year, preparing their tax returns, helping them to understand and plan for their tax payments, helping to do tax consultancy and planning. If they say, hey, I've got this great idea, how will it affect me? What's it going to do to my childcare vouchers? What's it going to do to my child benefit? How does it interact with the rest of my life? Can I pension this? Can I do this? What about my payments on account? So we have a lot of different fields that we get involved in, and it's basically anything to do with taxation and tax planning. And then, of course, the help with NHS pensions, which is a minefield in itself. And that can be anything from help me with my PCSE contributions, they've gone wrong, as many have, my NHS pension record, my type 2, type 1, or both sets of pension certificates, annual allowance charges, McLeod, that's a buzzword at the moment, and anything in between. So varied is the short answer.
Yeah.
And that
And
was the long one.
anything and everything really
Basically,
then.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
So a couple of things there. You mentioned the word compliance, which immediately made my blood
Mm.
pressure spike. But you also mentioned that people might come to you with some ideas that they might.
Yes,
So what sort of ideas might people come to you with, or general ballpark ideas?
that's a very good question. So, for example, I'd like to take a sabbatical and I want to go to New Zealand for 6 months. Whilst I'm in New Zealand, I think I might do some remote work for a UK practice, but I'll also work over there. What would be the best situation, timing, planning, etc., in order to minimize tax? What are the implications? What happens to my pension while I'm gone? That type of thing. That's just a very off the
Yeah.
cuff example, but it could literally be anything that people are contemplating. What would happen if I took on an extra couple of sessions? What would that do to my take home income? That's another example.
That sounds exciting. I never thought I'd say that on a podcast talking to a tax advisor. But yeah, so I mean, obviously those are high stakes, very
Yeah.
complex, very complicated things to approach you for. Okay, that's interesting. And compliance, does that mean you're making sure you're filling in the right boxes on a form?
Yeah, it does. So it's, have I done the things that HMRC require me to do and that NHS pensions require me to do? So as a self-employed GP, you'll have an obligation to fill out a tax return at the end of the year. That obligation, that's compliance. As somebody who's worked as a type 2 practitioner, you'll have an obligation to fill out a type 2 pension form. That's compliance. So the things that you have to do, or really ought to do and get caught up on in some cases, those are compliance. And then the things that you are considering, thinking, contemplating, planning, that's more advisory, I would say.
Okay. So you've mentioned that herd of elephants in the room, haven't you? The type 2
Yes.
form. And we're talking today, we're recording, this is the 5th of March. I believe there's been an extension to fill out that form to the end of March. Is that correct?
Yes, there has. So the ordinary deadline would be the end of February following the pension input year. And just for clarity, the pension input year is the 1st of April to the following 31st of March. It's almost aligned with the tax year, but not quite. You'd usually have until the end of February following that period. This year it's been extended to the 31st of March. There's been a lot of problems, as you can well imagine, with the forms, in particular combining the mid-year tier rate changes that we had in 22-23.
Okay. So I'm listening to this podcast. I'm out on my run. Actually, that's not me. I'm more in a car, and I suddenly heard this thing about type 2, and I'm thinking, oh, that's really triggered me. I'm now running faster because my everything's just gone up. So what can you say to anyone listening to this whose last 6 weeks life since Christmas or so has just been one set of fever dreams about filling in Excel spreadsheets related to this? Well, do you have any solace or any advice or anything, any top tips you'd like to get across to them?
Yeah, I think that if you have that level of anxiety and fear and trepidation and whatever other word you want to insert there about a type 2 pension certificate, ask somebody for help. Sometimes it's worth asking an accountant or even a friend. But if it's complicated, go to an accountant for some assistance there. Is it worth the high blood pressure? I mean, maybe if you're sprinting and you're training to be a sprinter, great, it'll help you along your way. But if it's really causing that much problem, then get some help. I mean, the other side to it is if you don't fill in the type 2 forms and you don't get yourself up to date, compliance word, I'll use that word again because it's
Good word.
it's necessary.
Yeah.
Then you get to a point where the PCSE don't update your pension record. So the consequence of not putting in the type 2 form, your pension record doesn't get updated. That has knock-on effects and problems. You can't get calculations for estimate benefits with NHS Pensions. It's very difficult. They say, nope, sorry, your pension's not up to date. If you want to retire, if you're in that position where you want to retire, they say, sorry, we can't work out your pension. You can't have it yet because it's not up to date. If, heaven forbid, the worst happens and you have to claim ill health retirement and your pension's not up to date, that's a really bad position to be in. So you have a little bit of stress and anxiety now, which you could ask an accountant to help you with, or you have a much larger problem down the road. So I would always suggest, if it's causing you that much problem, it's something that does have to be done, take the pressure off of yourself, ask for help.
Anybody running and listening to that will just be doing their record personal best, I think now.
I think
that is quite scary when you put it in those, when you couch it in those terms of this, my new favourite word or worst word, compliance. All of a sudden it all kind of does make it a bit more scary. But you've also said that actually you guys are there to help. And
100%.
Are there particular digging deeper into the issues around the type 2 forms, are there specific things about them that you can particularly help with? Are you always able to resolve things with the type 2 form?
Generally speaking, yes, there's been a couple of cases, and this is, not to make you sprint even faster, but there have been a couple of cases where we've had PCSE problems which have taken, I think the longest one has been about 2.5 years to resolve. And I'm sure a lot of people will identify with that because, we don't get a magic pass just because we're accountants dealing with the PCSE. We do have to go through that same process. Sometimes we have to raise complaints. Sometimes we have to escalate complaints. There's all sorts of things that go wrong. And we are here to sort of persevere on your behalf. But on the whole, there have been cases where, yes, it's taken a long time, but it's been resolved in the end. Generally speaking, it's not that painful. It doesn't usually take 2 years for every case. That's an exception. That's not the rule, thankfully. But, generally speaking, yes, we can help. Is it something that you could do yourself? Potentially. It depends if you want to take that on or if you want somebody to help you so that you can focus on what you enjoy doing and what doesn't give you a blood pressure spike. And with the forms, we find that oftentimes people want to fill them out themselves. They feel that they're perfectly capable, absolutely fine, or they have a really complicated year where things have gone wrong with the PCSE, they're not sure if they've been fixed or not, they want some reassurance. You throw in a bit of maternity leave or parental leave, and chopping and changing of salaried roles in between. You have that whole mix, and they'd rather somebody else help them, which is absolutely fine. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, no, that all makes sense, and it's getting that it's just taking that pain away. Is it
Yeah.
really worth? And when you throw in the compliance, the thought of spending all that time and effort and stress getting your type 2 form done and then getting it wrong,
Yeah.
and then I often say if I can. In my life, patients have collapsed in front of me, gone blue, and my heart rate slows down, and I can just go into this mode, and I can do all the, the really cool stuff I'm trained to do. But oh my God, get summer practice, send me back a Form A from an NHS pension. I'm like a 4-year-old child, I think my wife says, "What is the matter with you, silly man?" But it's just something that I just find it all so stressful.
That's why there are other
And
people there to help you.
yeah,
So I am a firm believer of if it's within your comfort zone and you feel confident to do it and you're not having any problems, crack on.
fine.
But if you're having problems with it, you're stressed for, what, this isn't that complicated, but I just don't want to deal with it. I would prefer somebody takes that stress off of me so that I can focus on what I want to do. That's fine as well.
Yeah, and I suppose on our we've got as you know a massive Facebook group of,
Mhm.
of GP only, and we do get an awful lot this time of year, every year, lots and lots of really stressed colleagues with questions about the type 2 form. But I suppose we're potentially only hearing about those that are struggling. There will be
Yeah.
others who are probably not having that sort of problem.
Yeah, you tend to hear more always when something
Of
goes
course,
wrong. And I
yeah,
mean, it's really easy to hear all of that negative experience and think, oh gosh, it always goes wrong for everybody. It doesn't. It can feel like it at times. And, that there are a lot of things that do go wrong with the PCSE, but there's also a lot of things that go on relatively seamlessly. I think it just depends on who you get on the other end
yeah.
and how confident you are in your submissions as well. So it's a two-way street, as is everything.
Yeah, no, thank you. And you've just mentioned what goes on at the other end, so
Mhm.
PCSE.
Yeah.
So type 2 forms aside,
Mhm.
those of us who might be starting to get a little inkling about retiring and
Yeah.
claiming pension and all of that kind of stuff, and we might start to be thinking a bit more often about PCSE and where is all our money, and then we do that thing of sort of doom scrolling at 6 a.m. and you think, I'll just quickly look see what my TRS statement's like, and oh my God,
Yeah.
so for those, when my question, So roughly before one, how many years in advance should one start to think that TRS is something they really need to get a grip with, whilst they've been hopefully waiting it'll sort itself out by itself? How many years in advance, and what should we start to be how should we start to be planning the that final kind of roll into to claiming our pension?
My answer to that is probably not one that a lot of GPs are going to like. Having seen a lot of horror stories and trying to help people through them, I would genuinely recommend that you start looking at TRSs as soon as humanly possible on an annual basis.
Oh,
And that
come on,
sounds
really?
extreme. I know, I know, I know.
It's such a
Um,
buzzkill.
I
Anyway, sorry,
know.
carry on, Tori,
Well,
carry on.
I've got to live up to my reputation as a tax advisor, haven't I? And I'll tell you why. So there's this great want to trust in large institutions and to trust that they're doing everything properly and correctly. And while I think that that's always the intention, we know, and your listeners and the Facebook group and everybody that's posted something about the PCSE, for example, will know that that doesn't always happen. So what I would suggest is when you get to retirement and you've had a long and fruitful career, and you look at your statement and you find out that 20 years ago you've got a whole host, let's call it 10 years, 5 years of stuff that looks like it's way too low, it's wrong, things are missing. It's really difficult to go back and get the paperwork to evidence what happened 20 years ago and to get your pension to the place it should be. And when you're wanting to think about retiring, you don't want to be dealing with that. You just want to go, here's my form, give me my pension so I can go cruise around the world. That's not what you want to be doing. So as really, really, really boring as it sounds, if you can thoroughly check your pension record once and make sure that everything up to date is correct, then that means that when you look at it the next year, please don't frown at me so much. But when you look at it the next year and you go, oh yeah, that looks right, cool, I can move on now. It becomes a sort of, yes, I've logged in, yes, I've seen the number, yes, that matches my type 2. And when you then come to retire down the line, you've got nothing to find, you just go on that cruise. So I know it's really boring. So is doing your tax return. So is doing your locum A and B forms, really. But if it becomes one of those mundane tasks that you just do, you eliminate all of the problems and all of the stress.
That's very wise advice, and then of course we do think of it as mundane and boring because
It
it can be
is.
stressful. But it is, but it is,
It
it is,
is. I
but it
mean,
is.
I can't lie about it. There's some
Yeah,
stuff that's interesting. This isn't one of the things, but
but I
it
suppose
really
if
does serve you well.
yeah, if we reframe it in terms, it's a huge pot of money which we will absolutely want to
Yeah.
work hardest for us, for ourselves, and for our family, and so on, and
Well, it's
it will
it's
enable.
also what's going to keep you going when you decide, right, I've had enough of working, of being a doctor. That's what's going to support you. So you need to take care of that and make sure it's there so that you can be supported, so that you can eventually stop. There's very few people that want to keep working until they're 95 if they get there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I've just in my mind, I've just think actually it's just probably a good job to do,
Mm,
taking your advice to do it at the same time I'm sorting out all my tax stuff for my
yeah.
accountant every year, because that's when you're opening up those folders and files. Might as well kill two birdies with one stone, really. I guess.
Exactly. Yeah, it
Yeah.
can become part of that process. And the hard thing is making sure it's up to date. The really easy thing, which you could again pass on to your accountant, is here's my TRS this year. Hey, accountant, has it been updated properly since last year? That's really quick. So it's that initial checking that the history is right. And then the ongoing check, that's something that, I mean, even the checking the history is right. You can do that with your accountant. So it doesn't need to be a catastrophic task. It's just something that if you can face it once and then keep an eye on it as you go along, it really will put you in a much better position than finding out that it's a mess and there's a lot of errors in it when you come to retire.
Yeah, yeah. And just imagine the feeling as well when you've dealt with all of this and you've got the thumbs up from your tax advisor or accountants or whoever and say, yeah, it's all sorted. That must be such a nice feeling.
It
It'd been
absolutely is.
be lovely to impart that on as many of our members and listeners as we can. No, that's been that. I think it's been a really good run through for the type 2 perspective. If people listening don't feel like do these type 2 forms, then there's probably a sense of smug Schadenfreude going on at the moment. But so let's get counteract that then. So what about the what about the Form A's and Form B's and your PCSEs and your that sort of stuff? What would from your end of things, what kind of struggles and life events are you involved with when people are contacting you to help and support them with their locum pension side of stuff?
With the locum pension, it seems to be based around, I've submitted one thing to the PCSE. The PCSE don't seem to have a corresponding record. Something's either duplicated or missing. I'm sure you know this well.
Yeah, down back of the sofa.
Yeah. So how do I check that to see what's going on, what's really hitting my pension? B, how do I fix anything that's gone wrong? And I have so many people, and this is so sad, going, I just can't cope with the stress of pensioning my locum work. I think I'm going to not bother.
Yes, we
I
hear that a
know,
lot. Hear that a lot.
and I can understand the stress, but it's so sad that the administration of it is so complex and is so unfriendly from user terms that people feel they need to take that option. So those are the things I seem to hear about most. What in your perspective, so that, I mean, this is the accountant side, but from your side, and from talking to your colleagues, your peers, your friends, what are you hearing? What's the worst complaint from your end?
Gosh, the worst complaint is that they've been just joyfully, willfully, willingly submitting these checks, payments, and as it is, then logging into the TRS website and then finding there's just empty, or it just there's different types of pension, and things getting lost and stress building up, and then the locums having to make a complaint, finding that the advice they're getting is the only way to get anything done is to make a formal complaint, and then nothing happens, so having to make a complaint of a complaint. So yeah, it's that sense of pointlessness, I think, that and a huge cost is and not having the trust for something that you work so hard for, and it's such a high stakes job to do. All the risks you're taking in putting your neck out there to treat patients in a health service that is fraught with complication and complicatedness, and then your money, your money just disappears down like I say, down the back of a sofa, and you think, well, where is it? Who's got it? It also says, are we a GP? Is the NHS the only organisation that treats its people with his pensions in this way? This one thing that we build up to celebrate at the end of our careers, thing we're all looking forward to. Actually, it's just so toxic. And is that just us? Please tell me other people having to go through this misery as well. But
I think there are a lot of people that have problems with the pension. There are a lot of specific problems for GPs, and my opinion is that that's because of the way the pension is administered with the PCSE as a middleman. You still get problems with people who work as officers and for trusts, for example, but they're different types of problems. You still get problems with police pensions or MOD pensions and such, but where they don't have these middlemen, being the PCSE in this case, and this sort of external third party administrator, they don't have the same level of complications as GPs. I mean, you guys have to do, I'm going to go back to the pension forms. The reason you have to do these pension forms, it's sort of like it's almost like a tax return, but for your pension. But that's because the PCSE are administering things all over the place, and somehow they have to bring it together cohesively, and create a tier rate, a summary, all sorts of things like this from these different streams. So a lot of other people have problems with their pensions, but I think a lot of the problems that GPs face are unique to the situation around the administration of GP pensions in particular.
Right.
But don't worry, there's a lot of problems out
there. Yeah. So we actually asked on our Facebook group, I asked some questions yesterday about what people are having with PCSE, and it's so one of the questions was, still haven't found a way of knowing if PCSE have sent information across to NHS Pensions, or what to do if PCSE say they have and the NHS Pensions say they haven't. So how do you sort of sort out a problem that someone else says they're having from our end?
That's a really good question. Lots of really good questions today, actually, I must say. In terms of the PCSE sending the information to NHS, if they have sent it, and if NHS have got it, it will show up on your record with NHS Pensions. So there's a couple of different ways you can detect that information, because I mean, if you're waiting for a TRS to come through, there's a general output of total reward statements in August, and then they do a refresh around December for anyone who's missed the August run. But you're waiting a year to see if anything's been updated. That's a long time. So how can you tell in between? If you can bear to telephone NHS Pensions, and I must say they're infinitely more helpful than PCSE on the phone, but if you telephone them, and my advice would be to telephone between sort of 8 and 9ish in the morning, early, they tend to have lesser waiting times, then you can say, hey, NHS Pensions, when I've got through security, have you had any updates to my record recently from the PCSE? Great, thanks. Can you tell me the date that that update was made? And can you tell me the figures that they fed through to you? So you can literally talk to them and ask them. That's one way. The second way to see what's happened is if you go on to NHS-BSA, I say go on to, you need to email NHS-BSA. And I'll drag up the email address in a moment so that we can sort of talk about this.
You can put that in the show notes, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can email them. It's nhsbsa.pensionsmember@nhsbsa.nhs.uk, just in case you couldn't work out if it was an NHS address. But we'll put that in the notes.
Yeah.
But you can email them and you can ask them for what's called a service extract, and they will send you your pensionable pay history as they have on their file from the year dot onwards, and you'll be able to see everything that they have. So this is really good for people that have combinations of work, like officer and practitioner work, because you can see everything that they've been updated with. But you can also see, okay, that figure from 2022 that the PCSE have said has gone through, can I match that figure from my type 2 or all my locum forms or whatever to what's currently on the NHS BSA statement? And you'll be able to see it as they have it on that CSV file. So it's something that they've started doing I say relatively recently. It's been rolled out to a wider audience in the past 12, 18 months or so. It's a really useful document. So you can just email that address, ask for a service extract, and they'll send you through a CSV of all of your pensionable pay as reported to them for each NHS role as it's been fed through to them. So that would be another way to work out whether or not it's made it to your record. And they tend to send those out within about 2 working days if everything's
Wow.
going well. So it's a really, really useful resource to have.
I feel I've never heard that before. This is totally only people listening to this podcast will know that. That's the thing to do.
It's really helpful.
Yeah. So phone in NHS England 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. Ask for service extract, and then
Yeah,
great.
you can request it over the phone, or you can literally talk to NHS Pensions and say, look, have you received
Yeah.
an update from PCSE recently? Tell me the date that you received it and what was put through. And they should be able to give you that information over the phone. So you can do either one of those things.
Yeah. My only problem with all of that is it makes me feel like when I go to France, I think, right, I'll look up some French words and I'll be really smart and ask someone a question in French. And then I ask the question, I can't understand a word they're saying back.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to get my service extract and I'm going to look at it and I'm going to thinking, that makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. Is that when I call you guys and say, actually, what now? What next? How do I interpret this?
Absolutely. So if you look at it and you think this is a different language to me, then you go to your accountant and you give them all that information and they can decode it for you and they can translate it back basically. But you may look at it and you may go, yeah, I recognize that number. That's the number on my trust payslip, or that's the number on my type 2 that I literally just submitted, or if you understand it, great. If not, this is a set of tools that your accountant can take and it can help you decode.
Yeah. And obviously all this is going to come at a cost. You guys are professionals, and I'm also reading in here that if what you're doing is you're taking the stress and the hassle and the pain out of
Yes.
this, but
Yeah.
also I imagine the risks also of us, someone like me trying to do it myself. I'm probably going to then retire and thinking, did I do that right? Did I miss anything? I can't afford that second cruise. Maybe is that because I didn't do the right? Is this less pension
Yeah.
than I thought I'd get? Is this again? Would you say that that's a service, a value of using tax advisors, specialist medical accountants, that actually again they can take away that sort of free floating anxiety that actually someone who really knows what they're doing has actually taken all that uncertainty away from me. Is that the kind of what you're getting from your clients?
Absolutely. So it's twofold. There are some people that want the reassurance. They could sort of do it themselves or give it a stab. But they want the reassurance and they want to know that it's correct. And then there are some people whose affairs get really, really complex and they genuinely do need some outside help, some specialist help. And the way that I sort of put it to people as well, if you think of it perhaps in these terms, how long would it take you to wade through everything for you to put together your own tax affairs or for you to check your pension? How much would whichever specialist accountant you're going to, how much would they charge? You compare the amount of time, anxiety, and did I get it right, that you would spend. How many locum sessions could you work in that time that would probably more than cover your accountant's fees and take the stress away from it? And, is that of value to you? Because some people think, oh, no, I don't want to pay for an accountant. That doesn't add value to me. Totally fine. But if you think, you know what, I could have done 5 days worth of locum work or more in that time doing something I want to do, and I could have paid them and had some extra, is
Yeah.
that of value to me? And to have that stress taken off of me. So I sort of present it in that fashion. If
Yeah.
you think about it like that, then it's very different. I mean, I have an accountant. So I do my UK taxes. I'm an American citizen. I have to do US taxes as well. It's a very strange arrangement. I'm totally confident with UK tax. Could I give US tax a bash? Yes. Would I rather just pay someone else to do it because I will spend weeks on it, deliberating over everything? Yes, because that's of value to me. So you have to decide what's of value to you, what takes the stress out of your life. So I do my own UK taxes, I do everyone else's UK taxes. When it comes to something specialist that's beyond my remit, even in tax, totally different set of law, legislation, I go to somebody specialist. So I don't think that you should be worried about it. I think you should think, okay, if I did my locum work instead, what would I make? Is that, yeah, the offset works for me or not? Think of it in those terms. Think of what is valuable to you, and then usually it works out for the best.
That is quite something to hear someone who
Mm,
works for a tax business actually still pay other people to do their tax because you're
absolutely.
fully. But it's like doctors. If we're ill, we go and see a doctor. We're not going to do it
Yeah, and
ourselves,
if
are
and if
we?
it's something complex and you need a
Yeah.
consultant in a particular area, you would go to a consultant, wouldn't you? So that's what you have to think about. So I'm, very familiar with UK tax legislation. I'm not with US tax legislation. If you've got a super simple tax return, maybe you can do it yourself. Yes, I understand my pension statement. Great. If it starts getting a little bit fuzzy, that's where you have to decide what the worth is to you.
Yeah. 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 Brilliant. And in terms of that tax return, then for those listening, it's exactly 31 days to go now till the 5th of April, the new tax
Yes.
year. So, what time of the tax year should GP locums or anyone start thinking about starting to prepare for their tax return? Is there an advantage to leaving it or doing it early? What would be your advice?
You'll be aware that the deadline for submission isn't until the 31st of January, following the tax year rollover. Would I suggest leaving it that long? Absolutely not. It becomes a stress and a panic. So do you have to do it as soon as the 6th of April rolls over? No, you don't have to. Do you leave it as long as the 31st? I hope not, but people do. It happens. Somewhere in between, and again, in my boring accountant tax mind, the sooner the better is preferable. And I will tell you why. So if you do it sooner rather than later, you don't panic, you don't miss things, you don't then have to correct things later when you realize you left off 10 grand of income or you accidentally forgot 5 grand of expenses, that kind of thing. You will know your tax liabilities in advance. So you will have an opportunity to plan for them. If you think, oh gosh, I don't have that money right now, but in actual fact, I've got several months to work out how I'm going to get it. It's a much nicer position to be in than here's your tax bill, you've got 2 days to come up with it. Also, if you prepare the tax return early, and when I say early, what I'm really driving at is before the second payment on account, so before the 31st of July hits in, if for some reason your tax has reduced, if your profits are down or your expenses are high, or you've got some really interesting, EIS investment or something that helps you out with some tax, whatever it is, if your tax liability is less than your payments on account and you submit the form before the 31st of July, it sort of recalculates your payments, which is a really useful thing to
Ka-ching.
have. Yeah, exactly. So it means that perhaps for cash flow purposes, if you have a genuine drop in tax, it adjusts it as you're going and you don't have to shell out loads more than you ought to have done in July. This doesn't work for everybody. You
Yeah.
can't guarantee that everyone's going to have a reduction, but if there is a genuine reduction to liability, it can be really helpful to submit the tax return before that July payment becomes due.
And it wouldn't work the other way. You suddenly find you're paying more in July because you've
No,
earned what? No.
they don't do it that way. So you'd be eligible for a reduction if you've earned less, but if you've earned more, the original payment on account endures, and then you pay the balance of whatever's owing in January, along with your next payment on account. So
Yeah.
they save that bit to the end of the year. But if you can make a reduction, it could be done earlier.
Yeah. I love the way you said endures. That seems like a really nice word that you might throw into. Is that a tax word? Is that just?
I guess it could be.
Yeah, no, it's almost sort of
Your
poetical.
taxes endure. I think I've just been reading too much lately.
Yeah. Anyway, all right. Sorry. Moving on. Change the subject. It's often, or is it just me? When it's me, when I talk to people about tax and stuff, for me, it's like one of these poetic phrases. Someone once years ago, Judith Harvey mentioned this word. She mentioned free floating anxiety, and I thought I'm going to use that word. I love that word because that's something I can really empathise with. Free floating anxiety. Got a lot of that. How do I get rid of it? Well, that's one solution is an accountant, but. And another thing, I'm often sort of upselling because for me, by using a firm of accountants, it just takes up so much hassle and stress and all that free floating anxiety. But another thing I often say to people, and I just want to sense check with you really, is I sometimes say, look, the other thing about using a specialist medical accountant is you're less likely to be investigated by HMRC because of the governance and assurance process that accountants have. They're less likely to come and audit you because you've got a verified set of accounts. Is that true? Shall I stop saying that, or is that true? If you do your own accounts, are you more likely to get an investigation?
Not necessarily. Well, no, I think there is merit in that. So, if you do your own set of accounts and the accounts are sensible, if you see where I'm going,
Yeah.
then they do a sort of, there's a risk-based approach, and then there's a certain amount that they'll just sort of pick for checking. So if you have mistyped something and you've put in £100,000 worth of expenses, sense would say they're very likely to want to see what's in those expenses. If you have just gone, oh, well, my mate down the pub says I can claim all my dry cleaning and all my clothing and all of my travel everywhere, doesn't matter what it's for, and it looks disproportionate, or if there's an oddity that comes up, you're probably going to get looked into. If you do the account sensibly, you might get looked into as a random sort of selection check. We've got Sainsbury's scan as you go, and then every so often they go, right, we're going to do a rescan just to check, just to see. It's that kind of thing. Do we get investigations at the firm? We get very, very few. We still get the odd one. And I can tell you a couple of examples of what's come up recently. So, doctor with an annual allowance pension charge, scheme paid. And when I say scheme paid, I mean that they didn't pay the pension charge in cash. They asked the NHS scheme to pay it for them by an election. The downside of that is compound interest is added and they take it off of your pension at the end. But that was the situation at the time. The NHS pension scheme was supposed to pay the tax. HMRC went to reconcile the tax account, couldn't find the tax. So they send through an information notice. Turns out in the end that NHS Pensions sent the tax, but the reference was a bit skewy and they just couldn't find it. So after they tracked it down, it was fine. It caused a lot of anxiety for this doctor. But yes, we did still get an information notice through. It was something funny NHS Pensions had done. Another one that came through, this was a little while ago, we had a trust doctor so slightly different arena, but it's a good example, who wanted to claim for a very costly piece of equipment. And we went back and forth and we went, oh, you know, employment legislation, this, that, and the other, justify it to me, go on, justify it, and we'll put it in if we can justify it. They did. I did say, you know, this is likely to trigger an investigation. It did, fine. But we were able to robustly defend the claim and it was agreed by HMRC.
Oh.
So it's not always the case that they investigate you and they go, nope, you're thousands and thousands and thousands. Sometimes they do. Sometimes a scheme pays election has accidentally been missed by the client and they do have to make up the tax. But, you know, we're not exempt from having information notices and things like that come through. But when you have an accountant backing you up, they would have hopefully, if the accountant is a good one and a rigorous one, have really put you through your paces first, been pretty sure of what they're putting on and being able to help you out in events like this. If an investigation comes through, they can really help to fight your corner. So that's another side. Do we get some investigations occasionally? Can we help clients through them? Absolutely.
Wow.
So yeah, I would say that it's less likely with an accountant if they're a good accountant and they don't just chuck everything through. But you know, you're not safe anywhere. Does it have to be too dramatic? No. You just answer the questions and you be upfront with HMRC, and hopefully your accountant will have done enough to protect you in the first place.
Yeah. So often quite a bit of digging and detective work on yours. This hasn't just turned into a true crime podcast, but it's kind of the next best
I mean,
thing,
it's
isn't
close.
it?
It's yeah. I mean, this is pretty exciting stuff. Actually, if I'm being honest, this is some of the more interesting work. So it does get a little bit pieced together. Detective, can we defend our client? You know, it's sounding like a cross between Law and Order and you know, a whodunit, doesn't it? But no, it's quite nice when you're able to get a good result and you're able to help clients. So this can be the gritty stuff, can be some of the more interesting work from our perspective. It's very stressful for the client, but we try and take that out and, you know, get the best result that we can.
No, lovely. So I think that's probably a really good note to end on. But before I go, just a couple of little things. Is there
Sure.
anything more you would? Is there one final hot tip or something you'd like to say to our listeners about tax advice or anything like that?
Yeah, I'm going to give you a couple of hot
Oh,
tips.
more. Carry on.
Yeah. So don't bury your head in the sand. That's my top tip number one. It's probably an inviting option at times. And it probably seems like, oh gosh, you know, I've got so much work to do, I'll just deal with it later. The longer you leave things, whatever they are, whether it's your pension, whether it's your tax, whether it's finding out what your tax bill is going to be, whether it's going, I know I'm not going to be able to pay my tax, but I don't know what to do about it right now. Don't bury your head in the sand. The sooner you address it, and or get somebody to help you address it, the less painful it will be in the long run. The next top tip is your accountant, if you use one, can't read your mind. You may think, okay, I've given them one payslip and two locum A forms, can't they work out the rest? The answer is no. So although we will do all the processing for you and we'll do as much as we can to help you, you do need to communicate. You need to give us a full list of information, be that all your receipts and all your income, or you know, whatever it is. We can't read your mind. So the more you communicate, the more effective this will be. And the third one is if your accountant asks you a question, we don't care about your personal life. You know, it's not for that purpose. It's usually because there's some weird, obscure bit of tax legislation or something that we think might be relevant to your case. So if we ask you a question, please answer it. Because there's so many times I'll send somebody an email and I'll write 3 questions on it and they might answer one and then leave the others. And I know that you're time pressured and I know that there's so much going on, but it's usually because it's quite relevant to what we're trying to achieve for you. So those would be my 3 pieces of advice.
Yeah. You woke up at 4 a.m. with that one, didn't you? You thought you felt really passionate when you said that.
I did. It was burning in my heart, but no, it's like, right, I've got to write that down before we do this today.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. It's really good. And I'd also just like to say, as in terms of you, Tori, you and your team, Liz Densley. I've known Liz for decades now.
Yeah.
Right when we first set up NESGP, you're based in Sussex, like we are. You're in
Yes.
Bexhill-on-Sea, and you've written. You and Liz have written so dozens and dozens and dozens of articles for
Yeah.
NESGP on our website. It's really has helped informed hundreds, if not thousands, of GPs over the years. Would be thousands over the years. Your articles have always been so popular, so well considered. You've given to really in-depth advice, and so it's been fantastic knowing you and working with you all these years, and long may that continue. And if people
Absolutely.
want to contact you, what's the best way they should go about that? Do
Anyway,
they need to
that's
take the train to Bexhill-on-Sea? As because I'm asking.
absolutely not. No, they can give us a telephone call. We can arrange a Zoom or Teams meeting. They can email. Basically, by any means that's convenient to them. We have clients all over the country and actually all over the world now.
Wow.
So it's not restricted to location. We've got a lot of people that, you know, started off in the UK and they've gone abroad. But literally anywhere, any means, you don't have to be in Bexhill, just reach out and we'll be happy to help.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Tori. That's been
You're very
really
welcome.
interesting and fun. Like I say, it's just that
Yay.
I've really enjoyed myself, and I hope other people listening too. And I hope those of you who are out running have had your protein. You know, had a bit of a rest now, done some
Broken some
stretching.
personal bests there.
Personal best, yes. I think we should get some accolade for that. And so, thanks everyone for tuning into the Art of GP Locuming podcast. You can subscribe on all the favourite usual channels. If you've got a topic you would like us to talk about or someone to talk to, please let us know. If you'd like to be on the podcast, let us know. All GPs have got something really interesting to say, and we'd love to hear from you. So, thanks again, Tori.
Thank you.
Take care and speak to you again soon.